There, I want to read a passage from the book of Mark. It's Mark chapter 16, and Jesus has already risen. The ladies have gone to the tomb, much of what we talked about last week. And as they're at the tomb, an angel talks to them, and this is what the angel says in verse 6 of Mark 6:16. The angel says, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." Now there's something interesting about this, and it's going to be what we jump into today. Why does the angel differentiate Peter from the other disciples? Peter's been right in the middle of it with them. He's one of the apostles. He's one of the boldest of the bunch, and yet the angel says to him, "Go and tell the disciples and Peter that he's headed to Galilee." As we head into that topic and as we look at this, I want to open with a question for us. Have you ever failed at something? I mean, miserably, flat on your face, failed. 11th grade chemistry, right here. Have you ever taken something on and just dropped the ball on it, failed with it? Maybe you were supposed to be someone's ride, and you forgot. You left them at the airport for days. Maybe someone was counting on you to be the hero. You have to make the connection for them for a job. You have to be the one to provide for the bills and the income. You have to give them all the answers they're looking for in life. They are dependent on you for everything, and you carry the weight of responsibility for it. And then things don't turn out the way they had hoped, and therefore it is your fault. And you carry and you feel a sense of failure. Down by one, clock has expired, hit 2 free throws, and you win. And you miss both. You failed your team, you failed yourself, you look in the mirror and you know it. And you know what? You're going to remember the sound of the ball clanking off the back of the rim for the rest of your life. Have you ever failed at something? Have you ever felt like you failed God? God, I'm done gossiping. I'm done talking about others. I'm done losing control of my mouth. From here on out, I promise I'm going to be good with my words. And then the story comes along that just has to be passed on. Lord, I'm done watching that stuff. I'm done with those kind of movies until everyone else is going, so maybe I'll go too. Lord, my finances now, they're going to be in order. They are going to be the way the Bible says. But there's a sale. Have you ever felt like you failed God on what he was calling you to do? Lord, I will watch my attitude. The hothead, the temper, the overreacting, it's over until your boss gets on you about something or your teenage child gets this far from your face. Have you ever felt like you failed at what you promised God? Last week I told you the story about 2 guys that walked up to me in McDonald's. Anybody remember that story? I mentioned it last week. Okay, so for those of you who weren't here, short version, I was sitting in a McDonald's, Leesburg, Florida, pair of shorts, t-shirt, nothing special, sitting in a back corner of a very full McDonald's. The line was long, it was lunchtime, and 2 guys walk straight up to me and say, "The Lord told us to tell you that what you've been waiting on and you think you're supposed to do it now. Now's the time, now's the season. Stop waiting, go do it." And I'm like, okay. So I texted my wife, and I knew what it was. I knew what it was as soon as they started talking. And I text my wife, I text my kids. They said this happened. This really happened. I was there, I promise. And I text them, and I tell them what happened, and my daughter writes me back, and she says, "Duh, Dad, you know what it is." And I knew what it was. I was supposed to go get my master's. I knew it. I knew the timing of it. Gina and I had been talking about it. Everything was in line for it. The church I was working at, they were like, "Go do it." You know, it was more of an online program, so we were really busy. We were in a time of growth, but they were all for it. And 2 people show up out of nowhere and tell me to go do it, and do you know, I still did not do it. I had every excuse in the book. Kids are busy. Kids are growing. I'm busy. Church is growing. I'm super busy there. It's not a convenient time. I got kids in school, and there's responsibility there. And there's going to be another time. There'll be another way. And there's so many questions that I just can't answer right now that this probably isn't the best time. Clear cut, right to the heart of it. It was fear. It was fear. It was fear of finances. It was fear of failure. I had been out of school for 20 years at this point, and I've never been the great classroom guy, just being honest. So then I had this opportunity to go back to school, and I could picture myself going, Sophia, Dominic, get good grades. Look, Dad got a D. It just wasn't what I had in mind for, and I was just so afraid of failure in this. Fear of the unknown. There were so many questions that I would have had to answer. Fear of being inconvenienced. I'm busy enough. Isn't there already enough responsibility? Isn't there already enough to do? I'm here. I know God has called me here. This looks awesome. This is where I'm supposed to go. But why would I go here when this can be good enough? When this has gotten me by. When there's a lot of people who would love to live right here. This thing is about to drive me nuts. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people who would love to live right here. So why do I have to make the jump? And I came up with all the excuses. I gave all the excuses. And as the timeline got nearer to sign up for the classes, those excuses just became stronger. And little by little, I let it go. And the day after the sign-ups, I knew I blew it. Ever feel like you failed God? Ever feel like He paved the way and you turned Him down? It looks great, but it's not going to be easy. If anyone understood failing God, it'd be Peter. When you look at Peter after the crucifixion, let's try this again. When you look at Peter after the crucifixion, before the crucifixion, he says to Jesus, I don't care what anyone else does. I'm never going to leave you. I don't care if the rest of these clowns deny you. I will never deny you. He not only denies Christ once, denies Him 3 times. Ever feel like you failed God? Now we get to the point where after this denial, Peter faces Christ for the first time. The very person he let down. The friend, when a friend is needed most, was not a friend at all. John 21, beginning with verse 1. It says, afterward, Jesus appeared again to His disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. Now let's stop right here. Keep your finger there. We're going to come back to this chapter. But we look at the scene. It's been a long night of fishing. I'm not a big fisherman, but from what I understand, night fishing is pretty normal. Anybody ever gone night fishing? Okay, many of you have. After a long night of fishing, they come back, they're hungry, they're tired, and they caught nothing. Also, from what I hear, not unnormal. After they get back near the shore, they look, someone's on the shore, the sun is just rising, they don't recognize it's Jesus. He says, hey, throw your net on the other side of the boat. And as they do, they pull in this huge catch of fish. John realizes it's Jesus. Peter, out of excitement, jumps in the water and swims to shore. And this kind of always stands out to me. He swims to shore and then gets back in the boat. Kind of unique. He's helping them get the fish out of the boat. As they get to the shore, it's probably a mix of joy and pain for Peter. We have to remember the scene that Peter has just left behind. First of all, when Jesus called Peter, He called him out of a life of fishing. What's Peter gone right back to? Fishing. There's a time when Peter and the disciples had spent a whole night fishing, and Jesus told them, hey, you didn't catch anything, throw your nets on the other side of the boat. This is well before this experience. So this is going to ring true and bring back some memories for him as well. And then as he gets to the shore, the passage tells us Jesus has a fire going and he's made them breakfast. And the smell of the fire, the smoke in the air may have been very similar to the smell he would have had in his nostrils as he was denying Christ for the third time, standing around a fire at Christ's crucifixion, at his trial. Jesus, I'll never deny you. Jesus, I'll never fail you. And it's the very thing he does. Let's pick up reading verse 15. It says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. Peter's stuck with a choice now. There's what he's always done, and there's what Jesus is asking him to do. There's the past and the present with what he's comfortable with, and there's the future, which can be really scary when God is saying, take a bold step. Sometimes the hand of the Lord reaches out, and it can look awfully big and incredibly intimidating. Peter can easily go back to what he's known, or he can take a step of boldness. But there's a problem with staying where you've always been, and it's our first blank. Don't stay where you've always been. Don't go back to what you've always done, or you'll get the results you've always gotten, and you'll go back to being the same person you've always been. Don't go back to what you've always done, or you'll get the same results you've always gotten, and you'll go back to being the same person you've always been. Peter had a choice to make, and don't think it was an easy choice. Because in John 21:3, when they didn't know what was happening and there was no voice of the Lord, what does Peter say? I'm going fishing. And I hear a country song immediately. I'm going fishing. I'm going back to what I know. I'm going back to what brings me an income. I'm going back to the boat and the equipment I am comfortable with. I'm going back to what I can control. I don't even need God to be a good fisherman. I know what I'm doing. I'm going fishing. And what did the disciples say? We'll go with you. I'm going fishing. But if you go back to what you've always done and you do it the same way, you can't expect different results. The way one person said it, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting change is insanity. He was headed back to the life he had always known, to a place that had been comfortable. But in verse 15, Jesus starts asking a heart probe question with Peter. And it recalibrates his thinking. John 21, verse 15, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And with this, one commentary writer said he can see Jesus kind of taking a sweeping motion with his hand toward the boats, toward the nets, toward the fishing, toward a comfortable life, toward a steady salary and income, toward everything that he can control. Simon Peter, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, I love you. See, when Simon needed to be bold and stand for Jesus, his knees buckled. When Simon needed to be courageous around the fire, his courage failed. And now Jesus asked the question face to face, do you really love me? Do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord. You know I love you. And it's the same question Jesus would ask to us today. He doesn't ask about acumen and levels and letters before or after your name. Here's the question he asks each of us. Do you love me? Do you love me? The question I think we hear a lot of times when we try and live and we try and do things for God or even in life is, are you perfect? But that is never the question Jesus asks. The question he asks is, do you love me? I want to let you know something. For some of you, this may be a relief. Nobody is perfect. We know the only one who is, and we have to rest in his perfection because each of us has and will fail. Can you just turn to the person beside you and say, nobody's perfect? Nobody's perfect. You're not going to get everything right. Nobody's perfect. Jesus never asks Peter to be perfect. He never says, hey, Peter, you really blew it then. Are you ready to be perfect now? Because then you can serve me. It's never about being perfect. The question is, do you love me? One of the fun things for this painting, this was done by many of you. One of the fun things for our congregation with this painting is there are some people who love painting but hate doing it because they can't get it perfect. And on this, it was kind of a paint by numbers for those of you who did it. And you didn't even have to get it perfectly clean. And we painted the picture, and it kind of is a picture of life for me, and that we didn't get every single detail. We didn't get everything right. And with the painting, it was Scott who went behind with a paintbrush and just kind of cleaned up the edges. Some of you all went Picasso and just did whatever you wanted. You put Scott to work. But the thing I look at in life is we're not going to get it all perfect, but it's amazing how God can bring the pieces together when we work together on it, and then we allow him to step in. We're not going to be perfect. We're never called to be. We're called to answer the question, do you love me? Let go of the dream of being perfect. Perfection is not going to happen on your job, in your home, in your hobby, with your skills, in your marriage. Perfection does not happen in your finances, in your religion. You're not going to live perfectly. We're not called to. The question we're called to answer is, do you love me? One person said, love is the greatest privilege in the world, but it brings the greatest responsibility. Love will change your actions. When you love someone, your motivations to them and for them will change. And this leads to the next blank. Don't miss your assignment out of self-pity or unforgiveness. Don't miss your assignment out of self-pity or unforgiveness of others or of yourself. Jesus followed every one of these questions of love. He followed it with an assignment. Simon Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. Then feed my lambs. Simon Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep. Simon, do you love me? Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Then feed my sheep. Out of love will come our call. Out of love comes responsibility. He uses our skills, our gifts, and our passions. And when we answer the question, yes, Lord, you know I love you, they're to be available for him. Peter lived the rest of his life in service and in caring for Christ's sheep to the point that it cost him his life in a martyrdom. Do you love me? Our goal should be to contribute and not just consume. It's one of our core values as a church. We're called to contribute out of love for Christ, not to impress anybody, not to check any boxes. It doesn't get us to a better level of heaven. It's to answer the question, do you love me? We talked in week 2 of this series about our greatness is not found in the seat that we sit in. It's not found in our titles or seats or position of favor. It's found in our service, a service that's done out of love. When we do that, we won't operate in fear, but out of love, we'll operate in faith. We'll take steps of faith. And some of you think, steps of faith, that sounds risky. It is. It is. Anything of value, anything of worth will require a step of risk. How many of you got married? Was there a little risk involved? Anybody have kids? Any risk there? Ever start a business? Any risk there? We don't always get all the answers when Jesus says, take a step of faith. We do have to have one question answered. Do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. Know the forgiveness of the Father and stay faithful and available in that love. And it's amazing how God, out of faithfulness and love, will use the one that no one else expects them to use. You may feel unworthy. You may feel unqualified. You may feel unknown. Be careful, because that means you're the perfect person for God to use. Peter, stop being a fisher of fish and start being a fisher of men. But I know how to fish for fish. I'm pretty good at it. I got an income from it. Do you love me? Do you love me more than these? Feed my sheep. Feed my lambs. I don't know what God may be putting on your heart to do. I don't know the area where he may be calling you to step out. But if you have a fear of failure or an unforgiveness even of yourself, don't let it be a lid to what he's calling you to. When you fall and you fail, which you're going to do, we all are. My challenge to you is get back up. When you fall or when you fail, be ready to get back up. And here's why. Remember this. Jesus does not hold grudges. Jesus doesn't hold grudges. I want you to think of what Jesus could have said to Peter, seeing him for the first time, one-on-one, face-to-face, after Peter had just denied him, walked away from him, turned his back on him. And yet Jesus doesn't throw it in his face. Christ does not hold grudges. What does he say to Peter? Follow me. Don't worry about anyone else. You follow me. But Lord, what about John? Later on in chapter 21, Peter asked the question, what about John? What's going to happen to him? Don't worry about anyone else. You follow me. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Then follow me. Don't worry about measuring up to someone else's standards. Follow Jesus. Don't worry about being the perfect mom or dad or worker or dad or pastor or elder or professional or son or daughter or student or anything else. Do you love him? Then follow him. Maybe you struggle with this. Maybe what I'm hitting on today has been your battle. Forgiveness, beating yourself up for something of the past, trying to be perfect before you do anything. Jesus says, set it aside and answer the question, do you love me? What we want to do today, in closing out the message, is you'll see in your bulletin a blue piece of paper. And if you and your spouse are sharing a bulletin, go halvesies on it. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down the thing you just cannot forgive yourself for. I want you to write down the thing where you just don't feel you measure up. And either during the last song or after service, I want you to bring it to the cross. I want you to remember, Jesus did not die for you because you were perfect. He died for you because he loved you. And he died in our place for our sins. We don't need to be perfect. Our call is to love him. He showed his love for us. Let's leave these things at the cross. What is it that eats at your mind? What is it that you feel like you're a complete failure at? Leave it at the cross. What is it that keeps you awake at night? What is it that causes you not to be able to eat or go straight for the Haagen-Dazs? Whatever it is, leave it at the cross. Don't take it home today. The enemy's going to try and bring it up in your mind again. It's the things you want to control that you can't. Leave it at the cross. Don't take it home today. Do you love me? Yes, Lord, we love you.